welcome to AMC Rewind. Still working on my sound effects. I'm Alicia Malone. This is a show where we celebrate lost and old and forgotten movie masterpieces and hopefully inspire you guys to watch some of them. I'm joined this week by two very intelligent men. First up, my AMC Rewind co-host, Mr. John Schnepp.
What's up?
And he's a reporter for M Time as well as writing for every other publication known to man. You would recognize his name and his face too, Mr. Todd Gilchrist.
I wasn't aware that I was going to have to do sound effects, so
Yes.
I'm going to decline.
DJ, come on,
Yeah.
DJ Todd.
We're going to
like
re-edit you so it sounds like you're like,
That's fine, yeah.
Like
Like a 90,
decline.
that's great. We'll do like a Max Headroom kind of thing.
Yeah.
We can rewind on that one next week.
Love it. So the theme for today is 70s conspiracy thrillers, one of my favorite genres. And the 70s was such a great time for cinema, particularly for American cinema. All these great political thrillers started popping up in response to what was happening politically, like Vietnam and the Watergate scandal and assassinations, and they became like their own genre. And I love them, Schnepp, because not only are they fun to watch, but they also make some great comments on society.
Yeah, they do. The scary overlords who are controlling us all, you know? And that's still going on. So I don't see why you can't have conspiracy theory movies all the time. I think we recently have fallen out of favor with conspiracy theories. Instead, it's like the Da Vinci Code. It has to do with some kind of religious artifact in order for it to be a conspiracy. I'd like us to go back to hard facts where people are just backstabbing other people and it has nothing to do with supernatural powers, you know?
Yeah, well, we still see that with even like Captain America Winter Soldier had the 70s political thriller vibe. Now, Todd, when I told you about this theme, you said parallax view all day.
Yeah, that's
Is that
right.
one of your favorite films?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I love so many of the ones from the 70s, but that one in particular, it's combination of just sort of incredible visuals. I mean, like Gordon Willis as a cinematographer, watching it, it's like there's just this pitch blackness that makes it so much scarier as it's this person. It's sort of like if David Fincher's The Game was not about like one rich dude, but like this investigative reporter who basically gets involved over his head.
Yeah.
And it's just so great. And Warren Beatty has that great sort of like, it's like persistent aloofness or something. I don't even know how to describe it other than that, but it's just this thing where he sort of goes through the movie and you're like, is he really invested in this or is he not? But he just keeps going and it keeps getting worse and it's out of control. And it's just an amazing and in many ways like genuinely sort of terrifying movie.
Yeah, I've got to say, I was going to bring up the parallax view as well because that's one of my favorites. It's chilling, and a lot of people have not seen it. I try to watch it like once a year. It's really well shot, and it has this really horrible, like, anticipatory dread following all the way up to when it ends, and then you're like, oh man, it's one of those 70s oh man endings.
It's a bummer of an ending, for sure.
But it really makes you want to see it again too, because it's really a really good film.
I haven't seen that one in a long time, and I think a lot of people, when they think 70s political thrillers, obviously think of All the President's Men, Manchurian Candidate, but Chinatown. But even if you look at something like Taxi Driver, that was very politically charged. These days, we see few and far between. I think we should bring them back. So, if you would like to get into 70s conspiracy thrillers, Rewind recommends 3 Days of the Condor. This is one of my favorite movies from this time, from 1975, directed by Sidney Pollack, starring the dashing Robert Redford. As a CIA researcher comes back from lunch to discover all his co-workers are dead. He goes on the run, has to figure out who is trying to catch him and stay one step ahead. And this is a really fun man-on-the-run thriller, as well as being a commentary on not to trust those in power. And I think that's why it still stands up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always reminded of Out of Sight, the Steven Soderbergh movie, because they have this whole sequence where they talk about how the two characters, Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford's character, sort of get together very quickly. But really the compression of the entire story is at once sort of like very calculated and also feels very unforced, which I think is what is central to its charm. And at the same time, sort of the escalation of stakes and everything it's just really fantastic. And as I think I mentioned before, like the score itself, Dave Grusin's score is so great, and that sort of really funky theme song. Those are like 70 soundtracks are such my wheelhouse anyway. But that one in particular, I was just thinking about it as soon as we started talking about doing this show. I was like, it just was turning over in my head over and over again.
Yeah, the great haunting jazz score. Schnepp, I heard they're thinking about turning this movie into a TV series. So that shows you how it still holds up, this kind of compressed time ticking clock.
I think, strangely enough, when I think of 3 Days of the Condor, I also think of Marathon Man. Both of those films are like would be a great double feature.
Yeah.
They're both like this kind of like compressed time situation, you know, very much like of like the next couple days this has to happen, you know. So yeah, I remember when I first saw 3 Days of the Condor, that sequence when he comes back and everybody's dead is horrifying.
It is. And Robert Redford, I love him in this genre because he's someone who's very trustworthy, and you believe him as someone who's this intelligent, and also you believe that Faye Dunaway would fall for him after he kidnaps her.
And I love all those scenes in the apartment. You know, it's one of those things where you're just like, you didn't even know that was where the movie's going to go, and then they have these sequences and, you know, this trust, non-trust kind of thing.
Well, you watch, I mean, we think about, you know, the sort of forced relationships of movies and how it can be, you know, we look at, certainly with the benefit of history, where we're like, oh, that was kind of rapey, or that was kind of weird. And there is like a sort of strangeness to it, but the movie is very smart about the way that it unfolds. So it ends up being something that, even though it seems sort of anachronistic and 70s-ish, it doesn't feel like you're going, oh, well, their values were so just like out of whack that you watch it now and you're like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. Like you can believe that these two people got together, and at the same time, it really does have like a visceral quality that I think holds up. I mean, you're talking about just the opening sequence, but even after that, like his friend goes to meet him, and like sort of what happens, it kind of gives you, it puts you on the back foot, because you realize that sort of anything can happen to anyone, and then you just have the whole movie sort of like with this promise of violence that pays off in a very very entertaining and smart way, I feel like.
Yeah, we won't give any spoilers away, but I love the way it ends.
Yeah.
The way that everything comes together. I also love Max von Sydow, who plays one of the shady guys following him. A lot of people would recognize him more from his more recent roles when he plays an older guy, but he is perfect, isn't he? So he's so charming as well as being haunting.
Wait a minute, our viewers would recognize him as Death from The Seventh Seal, right,
That's
guys?
right.
Like, no,
from Igmar Bergman's movie, yeah.
You know, I interviewed Max von Sydow a few years ago, and I was talking to him at the end about 3 Days of the Condor, which I guess I'd recently rewatched, and his response was, he goes, you know, I've made a lot of movies, and he's like, not all of them are great. He goes, I thought this one was pretty good. And I was like, yeah, to say the very least.
Right on.
It is really good. And I was excited recently because I often mention it in conjunction with Captain America too, because the Russo brothers were talking about how they were inspired by 3 Days of the Condor. They called it like 3 Days of Captain America on set while they were shooting. And then one of the fans from AMC, Lowell, he said he watched 3 Days of the Condor recently and loved it. There's this young guy who'd never seen it before.
Just fresh in college, Lowell.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that people are discovering this movie.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a really taut, well-written thriller. And it was nominated for Best Editing at the Oscars. And you can feel that pace.
Yeah.
Another great conspiracy thriller, which Rewind recommends, is The Conversation from 1974, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gene Hackman as a surveillance expert, Harry Cole, who records a conversation which seems like nothing special, but slowly he realizes that it could be talking about something much more sinister. Also features Robert Duvall, Harrison Ford, and John Cazale. So they go, how's Harrison Ford for
Wait
all
a
the
minute, did
Star
you say
Wars?
Han Solo's in this movie?
Yeah.
Well, I better watch it. That's right, guys. Han Solo's in this movie.
Exactly. And
He's
this,
like a puppy in this movie, too.
That's right.
He's so
I mean,
young.
he's so young. It's really funny.
so young. And I think this is one of Coppola's most underrated films.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, he made it in between The Godfather Parts 1 and 2, which is insane. Just think, oh, well, I'll just do this like little movie in
Whatever.
between these other ones. But, you know, what really resonates with me in this movie is not even so much sort of the larger conspiracy, but sort of his own sense of growing culpability or feeling of culpability as this sort of unfolds, because we learn that he had another incident in his past that resulted in some people getting killed that's only sort of alluded to, but it sort of haunts every aspect of his decision making, where he's used to being sort of very detached and professional. And the more this goes along and the more troubling it seems as he listens to it over and over again and starts to parse what he believes are these details of these sinister acts. just how self-destructive that becomes for him is to me like really overpowering, quite frankly.
Yeah, he becomes victim to his own profession.
Yeah, I particularly love the way this is shot. Just the way they use sound and the way they make you listen with the actual people who are listening.
It's true.
And it becomes one of the biggest parts of the film is what is heard, what is not heard. And it builds that kind of paranoia, which is such a really strong moment. The conversation is, if you haven't seen this film and you like films that make you feel uneasy and on edge, then this movie will do that for you.
Yeah.
It's really good. Gene Hackman, it's one of his best performances. A lot of people always refer to The French Connection, but this to me is him at his highest point of acting abilities.
Not the least of which because it's sort of against type. I mean, I was reading about it beforehand, and they were saying that during the shooting of the movie, because he was a much more outgoing and gregarious person, like it made him like really grumpy and unhappy because the character is so internal and sort of awkward when he's interacting with people. And you really feel that tension. I mean, just as a performer and a character, where you're like this is a transformation. You know, we think about actors disappearing into roles, and you can think of a Daniel Day-Lewis like really like rebuilding his body into a transformer or whatever that he would do. But this is the kind of thing where you watch somebody, there are no seams, you're just kind of like watching this guy really become a character. I mean, you know, the reason that we remember his name, even, you know, the character's name so strongly is because you don't think of that as like Gene Hackman is that guy. That's Harry Cole.
Exactly. It's interesting how it looks at it's kind of the moral responsibilities when you're using technology. You're almost distancing yourself from what's actually happening because you're seeing it through a lens or listening through a device, and then how that actually can affect you. And I think that's why it could hold up today when we're talking about drone technology, and also when we talk about privacy and the loss of it with technology. I mean, it's amazing this film came out so long ago, but it's still so relevant.
Yeah, two other things I want to mention. I want his jacket that he's wearing, that weird clear kind of plastic jacket. I was like, where can I find that?
Like a Macintosh.
Yeah, so somebody please make that, and I will buy it if you can make that for me. And then you were mentioning his acting. I love his acting in this film because it's so restrained, yet there's like this anger, this seething anger underneath it the whole time.
There's a surreal and sort of nightmarish moment that happens in the film, not giving anything away. And there's also a really haunting moment where he's playing the saxophone, and you guys know which one I'm talking about. And he learned how to play the saxophone just for this role. That's
some commitment.
But even beyond the saxophone, I mean, the score itself, I mean, it's different than, it's not as jazzy in spite of the fact that he does play the saxophone. I mean, most of it is this David Shire music that's just piano, and it seems really melancholy, and it's like one of those things where you're like, wow, that really taps right into what you feel like that character is feeling underneath all of what he's doing. And it just sort of, you know, he's riding on the bus and this piano's playing and it's kind of mournful and melancholy, and you're like, wow, this guy's life stinks. Like he's at the peak of his abilities and his career, and yet he seems so unhappy, and even like maybe to the extent that he can't even like fully recognize it at a conscious level. And that music really does that. And
as an audience, you don't know who to trust or what to trust when you're watching it. And like him, when he keeps listening to the conversation, you notice more things every time you watch this film. I love the way the dialogue of that conversation changes slightly. Same words, different emphasis. And that is everything in this film. Emphasis and what it means.
Yeah. And there's even a shot towards the end of the movie where the camera is sort of perched up high, and it's just like looking at this room, and it's sort of panning back and forth, and you know, you realize that it's very much like a security camera just sort of watching this guy's life, and how the movie really does like make you sort of complicit and question sort of how voyeuristically you want to witness someone else's life or behavior.
Well, now we get to do that all the time with reality television. Too bad they didn't know about it back then in the 70s. You know?
I hope they're making a reality series out of the conversation.
Yeah, probably.
Conversations.
Well, The Enemy of the State was kind of a spiritual sequel to the conversation, also featuring Mr. Hackman.
Yeah, too late. They already did. It's called Big Brother and Real World and all those other things. Be like, hey, let's just film these kids getting drunk, you know?
Film them in a house.
Yeah, film them in a house.
And I know this is a divergent, but I feel like the first series of Big Brother was so interesting because no one really knew how it was going to end up. Afterwards, now they know they can be famous if they go into the house. So it's not that exciting. But The Conversation won the Palme d'Or in Cannes. It was also nominated for 3 Oscars, but it lost Best Picture to The Godfather Part 2.
Well,
Wow.
If you got to lose, Francis
Yeah.
Ford Coppola has to lose to
Against
himself.
himself. What a great
Yeah.
year he had in 1974. So definitely watch 3 Days of the Condor and The Conversation. Now let's switch things up for Rewind Remembers. This is where we celebrate the movies having anniversaries this week. So 20 years ago, would you believe, Bad Boys came out.
What?
It feels
What
like
you gonna do?
only just
What you gonna
yesterday.
do when they come
This is
for-
the first movie ever directed by Michael Bay. Huge action flick starring Will Smith, Martin Lawrence. Made $65 million at the box office and then spawned 2 sequels after that. Rob Roy also is turning 20. Epic drama set in 18th century Scotland starring Liam Neeson, Tim Roth, Jessica Lange. And Don Juan DeMarco, which is one of the last few films to feature Marlon Brando. A comedy romance starring Johnny Depp as a guy who believes he's the greatest lover in the world and also has Faye Dunaway, who we're just talking about. So out of these films, Schnepp, what do you remember the most?
I remember, seeing some explosions and stuff in Bad Boys. I remember, what's Darkman doing in Rob Roy? That's what I felt. And I didn't see Don Juan DeMarco.
No, me neither. Did you ever see
No,
Don
I
Juan?
didn't. I didn't. It was one that I always meant to watch and I never got around to. Rob Roy has a great sword fight at the end, that really communicates, as opposed to sort of the deafness of most sword fights, like how wearying it can be, because he's just wielding this giant broadsword against somebody who's much more dexterous than he. It's Liam Neeson versus Tim Roth's character, and that I think is sort of the most memorable scene from that. As for Bad Boys, I remember really liking it and really being interested in Téa Leoni. That was that was what I remembered
Leoni.
very, very vividly. I thought she was pretty fantastic.
I remember watching Bad Boys and thinking, this director is cool. All these explosions, these cameras roaming
Yeah.
around.
The way he shoots those cars.
Yeah, it was so exciting
Yeah, it
at the
was.
time. And now I just get sick of seeing the same thing over and over again from him. But 20 years, that makes me feel old. Now, 30 years ago, Alamo Bay came out, which is one I haven't seen, directed by Louis Malle, who also did My Dinner with Andre. And this film starred Ed Harris as a Vietnam vet who feels he's still at war with the Vietnamese who just moved to his home in Alamo Bay. So it was a film that I never saw. But 30 years ago today, have you guys heard about this movie?
I haven't seen it, but I think it's better known in the States as maybe The Border. I could be mistaken.
No, the
but-
border was with Jack Nicholson. That's a totally different
Oh, was
movie.
it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm just totally wrong.
Yeah,
No
no, the
idea.
only thing I never
I saw
the-
that thing up there. I was like, I'm sure that's
I never
right.
saw the
So-
movie,
Yeah.
but Ry Cooder is I think Ry Cooder did the music for The Border.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
So
right.
maybe
It's
it
a
is.
Ry
Maybe
Cooder
it is the Jack
soundtrack.
Nicholson
Border,
Border
Alamo
film.
Bay.
And if that's what this is, then you should see it because The Border
Yeah.
with Jack Nicholson is a very fun.
I think they're two
quiet,
separate films,
weird
but
film.
same soundtrack.
Really?
Guy. Yeah, same Ray
What?
Cooder, yeah.
I'm tripping out.
Tripping out.
That's what 30 years will do to your brain.
I know.
Yeah.
Again, it makes me feel old. All right, enough about Michael Bay. Let's switch
You can
back.
never say enough about Michael Bay.
Switch back to the world of conspiracy thrillers for Rewind Reveals. This is where we give you a hidden gem that you may not have heard of before. And I chose this one because I wanted to point out that the 70s conspiracy theories, thrillers didn't just happen in America. Also happened around the world. In 1969, there was a film called Z, directed by Costa Gravas, and it's about a politician who is assassinated during a riot at a campaign rally and the investigation which comes after it. I love at the start of this movie they say, any resemblance to real events is not accidental, it is purely intentional. Because it's a fictionalized account of a assassination of a Greek politician in 1963.
And what state was it again? I mean, what country?
Well, it's funny because it's French language, so it's all French with English subtitles, but it never actually points out where it's set.
Okay, good. Because I was like, where is this supposed to take place? And I couldn't find any information.
No.
on that. All right.
I think it was shot in Algiers, but it's meant to be just a fictionalized place. But I love this movie because it has such a great fast pace to it. So you go through the campaign rally, you see the assassination and then the investigation afterwards. And when the bad people are hunting down the witnesses, the camera is right there in the middle of it. And it really feels very visceral and exciting. Have you seen this one, Schnepp?
I did. I watched it late last night on Hulu Plus. Thank you, Criterion Edition. Because I was like, what is this thing that Alicia's making me watch? Z. All right. And I watched and started watching it. Look, for someone who's brand new to Costa's filmmaking techniques and stuff, it's a little shaky. I'm not going to highly recommend it. It was fun though. It definitely got that. Boy, everybody's getting jacked over by the government. It's just like you really feel like you're keep getting put into these different rooms, and people just keep stabbing each other in the back after the other. It's a bummer. One of those bummers. This was like 69 before they really got to just everybody dies in a car at the end, 70s style films. This was still that kind of Zabriskie Point type of like weirdo ending type thing. For me, at least, it was one of those like, oh man, at least this happened. Then you're like, no, it didn't. Here's a bunch of like weird, like post up bulletins of things even worse things that happened.
I know. Yeah. It's one of these films that ends in a certain way. And then at the end during the credits, it's like, no, actually this happened. And then this happened. And then this happened. You're like, oh, this ended badly for everyone.
Yeah, you mean that guy? I thought he escaped. Nope, he got chucked off a building.
Like, damn it.
Oh, God.
But I really enjoy the pace of the film, and it sucks me in. I've seen it a few times now. Now, Todd, I know you haven't seen this one, but subtitles, do they ever bother you with movies?
No, not at all. I mean, I was going to say, being invited on the show made me want to watch it. It's sort of one of those that's been on my like long-term bucket list. Like I've been wanting to watch it and see it, and then I was sort of researching it in anticipation of coming on the show, and Jean-Louis Trintignant is in it. He's in The Conformist, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Another sort of, it's not even necessarily like a conspiracy thriller as much as it's like another character study, not unlike The Conversation, where there is that sort of larger sociocultural aspect, but it's really about like sort of one character, and the fact that he's in it. And I remember when like Mad City came out in the 90s, like Costa Gavras was like, they were like, oh, this guy who made Z, and at the time I was like, who's that guy? And then but that was the thing he was always associated with, and sounds like with good reason. In which case, I definitely need to make time to watch it, but if there are subtitles, it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, it does have a fast pace, but the fast pace happens in rooms. So it's sort of like, but they do these outside kind of like, I almost got killed by a guy trying to run me over. And it's really literally a dude just trying to run this guy over, all practical effects. And remember, this 1969, no CG, computers didn't even exist.
No.
They were like place card punchers, like ka-chunk, ka-chunk. It's like a giant room this big would be like a computer that can just like add 5 + 5. So no graphics to speak of. This guy almost got killed 5 or 6 times. And there's scenes where another person's fighting someone on a truck and gets thrown off the truck. And I'm like, that dude just broke his legs. I mean, that looked like so painful. There's some real like very violent situations that aren't done like action film violence. It's horrible violence.
There's
it's
a lot of clubs.
And that's the other thing too. Like, man, did they like to rock these like
people get hit with blackjacks,
giant rubber blackjacks repeatedly? Yeah, and it looked like it really hurt too. Violent. I was like, wow, that guy's like on the floor crying. I mean, it really showed you like, oh wow, like when they had riots, this is what it was like. There's like a whole crowd of angry people, and they're ready to attack anyone. You have that mob rules mentality where it's like, no, that's the guy who's trying to help you. Don't attack him. Too late because the cops are there pushing people. So it's sort of like, it's really, every time they have those kinds of mob scenes, it is frightening because you have this faction trying to fight the government and then the cops who are in the middle. So there's this, you don't know what's going to happen. So it really is a very interesting film. Z means He Lives, which I didn't know that. So it's a really, really cool title. If somebody ever wants to remake it, you just call it He Lives. That's pretty badass.
Yeah, those riot scenes are so full of tension because it comes out, as you can see here in this picture, the police are doing nothing.
Right.
And then occasionally the really angry mob, there'll be one guy breaking out loose and just sort of coming up to him, and you don't know what's going to happen. Right. And then they'll come back, and then a car will come out of nowhere, and it is really violent. So it's not for the faint-hearted. But I remember discovering this film when I went down the path of conspiracy thrillers, and it really stuck with me.
Plus, they have this really cool way of showing how you could just walk into any building, whether you're pro or con, like whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. You just simply walk into the hospital and just do whatever it is you want. You
Bring
just
a club.
Put some glasses on and you just pretend you're someone, and everyone will believe you. This was like 1969. You could just do that. So that's what happens in this film.
Well, I hear they're remaking. I hear Michael Bay is directing a remake, and it's going to be called He Lives with a Z at the end.
Yeah.
So that's what I heard.
Something that I would write in my high school yearbook. He lives. Van Halen. Yeah.
Love it. So there you go. Your weekend homework is to watch 3 Days of the Condor, The Conversation, and if you dare, try Z, and let us know what you think. I always love to read your comments below. Me and Schnepp try to reply to as many as we can, and make sure you tweet us as well. So Schnepp, where can people find you online?
Well, you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at John Schnepp and at TDOSLWH. I have my own feature film documentary debuting at the Egyptian Theater May 1st and 2nd, and there's a red carpet April 30th, so get your tickets online.
I can't think of any other film opening that day that I would rather see than your film. And Todd, people can find you at mtime.com if they can read Chinese.
Yes, if they can read Chinese, they can read my articles at mtime.com. Occasionally, I'll do video interviews, which I speak in English and then gets subtitles. So I get subtitled if you can handle that. But then you can also find me on Twitter at mtgilchrist, and you can find me on Instagram at bestdressedtodd.
You are the best dressed Todd I know.
I try to be.
And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Alicia Malone, and share this video with all your friends, people who you think might be interested. We know we'll never get the same kind of numbers as Jedi Council or Heroes, but I want more people to see this show and like celebrate classic films.
Wait a sec. I predict that this episode will receive at least 300,000 views by tomorrow.
I'm gonna stick my Parallax View fan club on this episode to get them to share it out.
Yeah, the Parallax View. I'm really glad you mentioned that because that is really one of my favorites.
Yes, chuck in Parallax
Especially
View,
that scene where he goes to that little river area.
Yeah,
there's just really frightening moments in this movie.
Yeah, chuck in Parallax View to watch as well this weekend, and share the show because we want more people to see it. Until next time, bye.
Hey everyone, if you liked this video, click that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe to our AMC Movie News YouTube channel. It's free and helps you stay up to date with all the latest movie news, as well as our daily AMC movie talk show. Also, make sure that you follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with all of our special promotions, contests, and prize giveaways.